Part 8. The consequences of indifference. So at the end, all the Autobots and Maximals have to go to the big citadel from Half-Life 2 to fight Scourge and stop him from using the key to open up a portal that will let Unicron come through into the Earth's atmosphere. Got it? They stand around Machu Picchu in broad daylight and explain their plan of attack.
At night is a big thing, right?
The humans are going to sneak in through a tunnel underneath the Citadel to reach a control panel that's going to turn off the big portal, while the Autobots fight Scourge to lure him away from the control panel and onto the battlefield. This is unrelated, but did you know that over 150,000 people visited Machu Picchu in the year 1994? The year this movie takes place? That's about 410 people every day. It's actually not as remote as you might think. There's all kinds of ways to get up there. There's even a hotel next to the ancient ruins that's been open since at least 1960, but I guess the Autobots and the Maximals just went there on the day everyone went to see the Spanish dub of A Million to One. You gotta take into account the fact that this takes place before the late 1990s, when the Peruvian government approved the construction of a cable car, restaurants, and a second hotel there. The plans have been delayed for a long time because scientists keep saying that the cable car and increased number of tourists would damage one of the world's oldest heritage sites. The United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization even added Machu Picchu to its list of World Heritage Sites in danger. If only the Peruvian government could get some kind of big promotion for Machu Picchu, like say, I don't know, if they included the site in a big tentpole movie, then maybe they'd have an excuse to build a cable car for the influx of tourists they'd receive.
Peru and these other locations definitely gave that. And then beyond that, the commercial part of it all.
Let something slip there, Steven. Anyway, Scourge uses the transwarp key to create a big Titanfall 2 arena for everybody to have a fight, conveniently placed miles away from anywhere the humans could see them. The final battle of Rise of the Beast is one that ticks all the right boxes for me, yet does absolutely nothing to please my stupid monkey brain. Part of the reason is the obvious fact that we haven't been given much reason to care about this guy, or this lady, or these guys, but that goes without saying. The issue here is really the overall setting of the fight. I've never understood the idea of having no human characters in live-action Transformers movies, or just having a movie with no human elements at all. Part of the appeal of the live-action movies is seeing things you're familiar with turn into these big scary robots. Two of the movie's best action scenes involved the Transformers fighting in human environments, and one of them was cut from the movie. Optimus dragging Transit's face through a bus, Transit ripping a lamppost from the ground and using it as a scythe, Noah and Elena running through the chaos outside the museum. Without these elements to ground the action in a real-world setting, it would become weightless and sterile. They may be small moments, but they remind you that you're watching 20-foot tall, 2-ton robots duke it out. It gives a sense of tangibility and scale and grit by having them interact with human-sized objects in places you know. That's the whole reason they made Transformers live action in the first place. Seeing these real places turn into war zones for these giant robots that can transform into the vehicles you see driving down your streets every day. Setting the final battle of your giant robot movie in a lifeless CGI environment where the most colorful thing to see in a mile radius is the homeless guy's piss puddle on the floor is just so boring. Everyone's standing around shooting lasers at enemies off screen. Noah gets a Max Steel suit and starts doing cartoon flips and superhero landings.
Life ain't a comic book.
Oh. I guess life is a comic book. At no point do any of the robots feel like they're in peril or at risk of losing. Any brief flashes of danger to our heroes are just as quickly ripped away. This isn't a battle, this is a massacre. Even Mirage, who gets shot like 5 times and dies, ends up totally fine and alive by the end of the movie, removing any stakes from any future installment since we've just been told our heroes have no risk of dying. But I already talked about that like an hour ago. It's totally doable to have a big battle set in a barren wasteland and have it be good. Like, just look at Mad Max Fury Road or TF Nation, but the loss of tangible, real-world elements make the whole final fight feel like a video game, and not the latest installment of a movie series that's been widely praised for its commitment to practical effects despite the robots being CGI. This doesn't feel like Transformers to me. This feels like Anthem or an Avatar movie if it was set in Grimsby. The action kinda just washes over you because of how little you care. I don't want to keep singing the praises of a director with way more experience than Stephen Cable Jr. did at that point in their career, but the finale of the first Michael Bay Transformers movie is a colorful and vibrant battle in the middle of a bright sunny city. It's actually quite yellow. It features characters you've learned to care about over the course of the movie, each one with either their own motivations or their own unique personalities. The use of real-world elements is what makes the battle fun and interesting. Having the Transformers crash into and destroy buildings, having them land with humans who are running away and screaming, it all serves the movie's goal of selling you on the fact that these are giant war machines, and they're here on our world, world. The reason they made Transformers in live action in the first place was to do stuff like this. And not like this. Stuff like this. And not like this.
Attract me!
You think I'm nostalgic for the old Bay movies and I'm shitting on this one because it's not like them? When I was a kid, I thought these movies were really bad because people on the internet told me they were. But I'm older and I can appreciate them for what they are. Well-made action movies with quality CGI, sound design, and creative set pieces that are unlike anything ever done in any movie before or arguably since. I wouldn't even mind so much if the majority of the fighting in this movie wasn't the classic Transformers Prime shooting 2 blasters at enemies off-screen to give the illusion that action is happening style of fighting. It's practically lifted from the show and everybody hated it then. They do this so much and it's not interesting, it's not engaging action, it's boring, they're just standing there. This isn't nostalgia, this was never about nostalgia. This is about making a fun and exciting action scene, and the first 3 Michael Bay movies just so happen to feature examples of those. I can start comparing this to John Wick, but it's the same result, so there's no point. Setting your final battle in a grey and brown dump where the characters feel like they're in a cartoon rather than a real tangible setting misses the point of making these movies live action in the first place. This is the same lesson Michael Bay had to learn when he made The Last Night, a movie that also sets its finale in a grey and brown dump where the characters feel like they're in a cartoon. That's not to say there aren't some cool moments in this battle, like the part where Big Boobs dies, or this shot, and this part where Noah's brother hypes him up over the radio, but the battle overall just rings so hollow. The Michael Bay movies and Bumblebee didn't have the most realistic grounded battles. There's loads of times in those movies where the humans should totally have died or broken something or whatever, but it stayed relatively within the basis of reality for the most part, other than the giant robots, obviously. The wildest moment in the Michael Bay movies for me was when Shia LaBeouf got that grappling hook thing and latched it onto Starscream's eye, and then started flying around without breaking any bones. Rise of the Beast doesn't have anything quite that bad. The only part that I can really think of is when Noah falls 17 feet on his back without sustaining any injuries whatsoever. I think having humans in an inherently cartoony, unrealistic environment kind of makes you forget about how shit works in the real world. Like, it's jarring when Shia LaBeouf gets whiplash from being flung around a parking garage, but it's kind of fine when Noah lands on his back and shatters all 33 bones in his vertebrae. So I guess it has that going for it. Hey wait, didn't Optimus say they were gonna
Lure Scourge onto the battlefield.
Why did he leave Mirage to do it alone? That's not very noble of him. He didn't get lured away from the control panel at all. He stays in this one spot the whole time. Nobody even came to his aid when Noah was grabbed by Scourge. Why did Optimus leave Mirage to fight Scourge all by himself? Is he an asshole? Why didn't any of these guys help? Were they afraid to give them something to do? Speaking of Scourge and his cronies, having the heroes fight through this endless disposable horde of generic robots that they keep taking down with such relative ease strikes me as such a bad idea, seeing as how the Terracons were decent enough villains up until this point. Something I liked about them is that they consistently made the Autobots out to be complete pussies. They've spent all this time on Earth, maybe they lost a little bit of their spark in battle since they probably haven't done anything like this in a long while. Having the Maximals team up with the Autobots to give them an edge in the final confrontation with Lady Big Boobs and Scourge would kind of fall in line with what the whole movie was about, right? Unity and teamwork and stuff? Instead, the Autobots dispose of the Terracons really easily. For 2 of them, they don't even work together to kill them. Prime and Primal work together to kill Big Boobs, which is neat, but this companionship should have been the point of the whole climax. That's what all this was leading to, right? The closest we get to this is Noah stabbing Scourge in his popliteal fossa, which lets Optimus land a punch on him. But then Noah gets taken away so the 2 can fight alone, so it doesn't matter. Optimus has a grudge against Scourge because he killed Bumblebee, but Primal has one too because he killed Air Razor and Funky Kong. He died in the first scene of the movie, and it's brought up later when the 2 meet again.
Wait, didn't I kill you already?
But this and Air Razor's death have no payoff. Optimus Prime kills Scourge alone with no help while Primal sits on his ass and eats a damn stinky banana. Did they forget the theme of the movie? Unity and teamwork? Why didn't Primal help? Were they afraid to give him something to do? It feels like the movie's theme and everything it was building towards just kind of fizzles out in favor of boring, unsatisfying action. The movie's over soon and suddenly it begins making hasty attempts to wrap up, like it just wants to be over with as soon as possible. While the battle's happening, there's like a big surge of energon and it revives Bumblebee about a mile away because he's resting on this energon deposit. Please refer back to what I said about heroes not dying in this movie. I can't be bothered to go over that again. At least they set up the revival and it doesn't just come out of nowhere and seem completely implausible. But then we see that the Surge fixed Stratosphere too? And he wasn't touching any of that shit. I thought the whole reason it revived Bumblebee was because he was on the Energon block. But if it fixed Stratosphere just fine, why didn't it revive Big Boobs? Does that mean that Shatter, Dropkick, and Blitzwing are back too? Actually, why didn't it fix Bumblebee's voice box? If it could stop Stratosphere from literally falling apart and fix the gaping hole in Bumblebee's chest, then surely this would repair his voice too, right? Wouldn't it have fixed Scourge's scary robot face as well? Whatever, it doesn't matter, let's talk about the dumb ending. After Optimus Prime kills Scourge by covering him in lava and brutally ripping his head and spine out, Optimus discovers the only way to stop Unicron and control Z, the big Titanfall arena, is by destroying the key, and he loudly proclaims this revelation to the rest, and there's a big sad moment where they're like,
Prime, no, we can't leave him!
So they leave him, and he destroys the key, but then they just come back and save him immediately. Like, they ran away, realized he was okay after the initial explosion, and was like, oh, okay, damn, whoops, let's go get him. Why didn't Optimus just, like, shoot it from afar? Then he wouldn't have been sucked off. Like, he had no reason to stay behind. If Noah's dinky little gun could destroy the key, then I'm sure yours could have too, right? If only you had a sharpshooter on the team that could destroy the key from afar so there wouldn't be any danger. Were they afraid to give us something to do? I wouldn't be complaining about what they're going for with this whole climax if the setup to this sacrifice didn't feel so forced and weird. What was the point of setting this up as a noble sacrifice if you weren't gonna commit? It feels like a bad joke. Why did everyone have such a quick change of heart? Primal even said,
Your sacrifice becomes our oath.
which is what Airazor said at the start of the movie about Chunky Kong.
Sacrifice will be our oath.
Like, damn, fuck your oath, I guess. Was that your character arc? That your oath doesn't matter? Your oath doesn't matter anymore because the transwarp key is destroyed and you can't fulfill your mission anymore? I'm not following. It's like they realized that they forgot to incorporate the main theme of the movie about unity into the movie's finale. So they just added this bullshit nonsense scene where everybody works together to save Optimus Prime instead of making that the theme of the whole battle. This whole ending to the fight is so rushed. Everything from Bumblebee coming back to the meaningless sacrifice feels like nobody knew how to end this damn movie. If you're like me, you're probably wondering why they decided to do this, right? Why they set the big explosive finale in a video game world that might as well just be an alien planet. It's not hard to figure out why, especially if you've been keeping up with the Lorenzos. Remember that pin from the start of the video? The one in Lorenzo? Pull that shit out right now. Oh no. Lorenzo deflated. Oh well. So is Rise of the Beasts a prequel or a reboot? Steven seems to think it's a reboot, but Lorenzo is pretty adamant that this is a prequel to the Michael Bay movies. Having the Transformers rock up in a city or whatever and making them have their final battle there would contradict with the timeline, since nobody knew the Transformers existed until like 2009 or something. But again, Steven has said a whole bunch of times that he wants to do his own thing, so he doesn't really care about all this continuity bullshit. I think this is the result of that. Having a big explosive final battle that you'd normally have in a city in a location that won't interfere with the Michael Bay movies. It's tiring because I'm pretty sure about 100% of the audience wouldn't even care if they rebooted it completely. It's stinky action for the purposes of keeping the timeline consistent with a universe the general audience doesn't care for. This isn't just me talking about the final battle either. This indifference has an effect on Rise of the Beasts as a whole. Not knowing where Megatron is, the Decepticons, being too afraid to kill anybody that might possibly have a role later in the series. This unsureness creates this weird disconnect between this movie and every other movie in the series. Rise of the Beasts tries so hard to both establish itself as its own thing while still staying in the confines of Bayformers that it manages to do neither. I didn't even know that was possible. The most frustrating aspect of Rise of the Beasts is that it would be easy to give you a quick review of this movie if it was mostly good or mostly bad, but it's not. For every well done action scene, every genuinely funny moment, every cool set piece, there's another one that's infinitely worse and sticks out in your mind way more than the good ones did. It's so wildly inconsistent in its quality in almost every aspect. The whiplash you get from scene to scene is so infuriating at points. You go from the hype of the epic museum fight to the stale and dry Peru half of the story. You go from the nice little scene between Noah and Elena to a plot point that's so confusing it takes you out of the movie. You go from the excitement of seeing Optimus Prime driving around the streets of Peru to a poorly edited chase scene. You go from the cool, heartwarming speech Noah gives at the end to the funniest ending in any movie ever. Oh wait, I should probably talk about this for a sec. Part 9. The worst ending ever is probably Remember Me, or Spectre, or The Devil Inside, not Rise of the Beasts, though it's really not great. What makes it so bad? Well, nothing at first. Noah is back home safe. Elena is finally being credited for her work in the field of archaeology, and the guy from House of Cards recruits Noah into a secret organization to fight world-ending threats. It's all pretty standard. The Real Hero Award? Does that mean there's a fake hero award? I thought this was a nice scene to end the movie on, wrapping up our two main humans' arcs. And then... oh, right.
At the end of the movie, in the reveal of like, okay, we're going to add a new element to this. What if it was just silent in the theater? Oops.
The badness of Rise of the Beast's ending is something that intrigues me because it's not super clear why it's so bad and unsatisfying at first. Like, you could point to the obvious criticism of them sequel baiting with a franchise that only old people and weirdos and the Welsh care about, but it goes a little deeper than that. And it screams to me that at some point, the want to tell an emotionally satisfying and complete story was lost for the sake of G.I. Jonesy. This one shot puts the previous 110 minutes into perspective in a way a movie hasn't done since The Shining. We just got done with a big grand finale where all of our heroes' beliefs were tested. Optimus Prime had a chance to go home and didn't take it in order to protect Earth. Noah had a chance to destroy the key, but didn't because Optimus Prime said please. How does any of this make them feel? Actually, how does Mirage dying make anybody feel? How do the Maximals feel about the fact that they can't use the transwarp key to protect young worlds anymore? How does anybody feel about anything? It doesn't matter. All these burning questions and character moments are left out to hang dry because we have to make room for G.I. Joe, Mask, Action Man, Animorphs, Buckaroo, Littlest Pet Shop, Micronauts, Jenga, Operation, Stretch Armstrong, Bop It, Mousetrap, Nerf, Magic the Gathering, Zoids, The Game of Life, Hamtaro, Lightbright, and Monopoly all crossing over to form the Hasbro Cinematic Universe. Instead of getting a satisfying conclusion, we get an ending that leaves us with even more questions. Both because the movie doesn't give us any satisfying conclusions to any of the robots, but also because of the inclusion of G.I. Joe. Where are the Autobots after the end of the Peru battle? What happened to Sector 7 in Bumblebee? Did they merge with G.I. Joe? How does Bumblebee feel about dying and coming back? How does anybody feel about Bumblebee coming back? How are these guys doing? Is Elena staying in touch with all of her new robot friends, or is she just going off to do her own thing? Maybe you could have had like Wheeljack or RC or Bumblebee drop Elena and Noah off at their homes, like the scene in the first movie with Ironhide and Josh Duhamel, just to show us they're still buddies with them? Were they afraid to give them something to do? None of these characters feel satisfyingly resolved. Optimus learned to not be racist and didn't destroy the key, so what's the goal now? He completed his arc, but that's not enough. What is he doing from here? What kind of changed person is he? He's changed, but how does that manifest? Is he gonna start protecting Earth? Don't you have a whole other planet to save? Your own planet? The ending feels so abrupt and unfinished, and it's another instance of the movie not taking time to just breathe for a second. Noah and Elena both get relatively satisfying conclusions to their characters, but the fates of the robots are all just left completely open-ended. Like, was this really more important than laying out the groundwork for where we're going from here?
What can you say about the development between a possible crossover with Transformers and G.I. Joe?
You know what? What's interesting is we have debated it for a long time. And there was never the occasion where it felt like a natural thing to try to evolve into. It always felt like, yeah, that's a cool idea, but it's feeling like you're forcing it. Steven came aboard and was immediately pushing in that direction. And thankfully, the movie really sort of led us to a nice way to bring it together.
So we know now that the G.I. Joe thing was Steven's idea. I truly, honestly believed it must have been a studio-mandated move, because I really can't understand why anyone would ever want to bring this franchise into the mix in a move that, from an outsider's point of view, looks entirely corporate and studio-mandated.
So what happened was, we kept coming back to G.I. Joe and going like, why would they know?
Hasbro has gotten G.I. Joe and Transformers to cross over before, and every time it's happened, It's been boring, lame, and pointless. Every other attempt has just been so bad, and I can't help but feel like these two things just might not mix very well. Maybe they'll prove me wrong, I don't know. But I've never seen G.I. Joe cross over with Transformers and not feel like they were just tacked on for the sake of brand synergy or whatever. It got to the point where I was counting down the comics until the crossover was G.I. Joe-ver. Sorry, I just really wanted to make that joke. I was trying to find somewhere to slip it in. Something I need you to understand is that movie theaters where I'm from are really quiet. Have you seen all those videos of movie theaters going crazy? That shit doesn't happen here, thank God. If it did, I'd give them something to react to. When I saw this movie, there were a couple of chuckles at some of the jokes, but it was mostly dead quiet. The loudest reaction the audience gave throughout the whole movie was the G.I. Joe reveal at the end. People were laughing and others just loudly exclaimed sounds of confusion. I couldn't tell if the laughter was at how absurd and dumb the reveal was, or if the audience was filled with G.I. Joe fans who were just hysterical to see their favorite franchise represented for the first time in 400 years.
Well, I don't want to give you spoilers, but if you've seen a particular movie, there was a particular little teaser that's G.I. Joe might not be over, but anyway.
Well, they never called me. Who's playing Metal Face?
We'll leave it at that. So, all right.
If you're going to bring in G.I. Joe, that comes with a whole bunch of characters you have to bring into the mix too. Beloved characters like Low Light, Baroness, The Rock, and Doctor Who. In a movie already stuffed full of characters, why would you add so many more that you won't have time to flesh out and develop? Like shit, you're struggling to make a coherent movie with just the Transformers alone. What makes you think you can do the same with the Transformers and G.I. Joe? It kind of makes you realize that, and I never thought I'd say this about a Transformers movie, the film might have needed to be longer. If they really wanted to go full steam ahead with all these ideas they had and all these new characters they brought in, then more time wouldn't have hurt the movie. People complained about the lengths of the Michael Bay movies not because they were too long, but because those runtimes didn't serve a purpose outside of mindless action. Bumblebee was like 8 minutes shorter than Rise of the Beasts, but it was as long as it needed to be. There are things that I would have liked Bumblebee to have done, but that movie doesn't outstay its welcome, and it doesn't feel rushed either. Rise of the Beasts feels like it needed another 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, not even for any big stuff, just to breathe.
I tend to like keep my director's cut pretty tight. At least the one the studio saw was probably like 15 minutes longer than what we have now. But there's small scenes in there that just cause confusion.
A bunch of the deleted scenes are just little character moments that flesh out our cast in small ways. Like this one with Elena and Airazor.
Well, the whole thing is working for you.
You should have seen me 2,000 years ago.
Oh yeah? What you was doing? Turning robot heads?
Maybe.
It's not much, but it's at least a little hint of personality for a character with very little. It makes us feel for Elena when Airazor dies later on, because we got to see this friendship form. And it's a cute friendship. They were nice together. Then you start hearing about how in the original cut, RC and Wheeljack had some kind of relationship, and Wheeljack would have been all concerned about her during the final battle. It's nothing groundbreaking, but it's something. This lack of breathing room makes the movie rush by, and it lasts all the way up until the very end when we get to that big Optimus Prime speech. The Optimus Prime speech and the sudden cutaway from the entire robot cast into the epilogue is so jarring and sudden. It almost feels like there was like a completely different ending that suddenly got removed at the last minute. Oh, there was? That's why Optimus's fake-out sacrifice felt so bad and pointless? Good job covering your asses, guys. Optimus Prime ending the movie on a big speech is kinda a trademark of the series at this point. The only movie in the series to end without one was Bumblebee, but the rest all end on him giving a big speech about what he's learned in the movie or whatever.
I am Optimus Prime, and I send this message that, as if we Autobots are on the Earth for one day, last drop of blood will be trained for protecting the human beings against Decepticons.
Something about the speech in Rise of the Beast just feels super off, which is weird because it's not much different from the other ones he usually gives, but I really think it's the build-up that kills it. What makes an Optimus Prime speech work isn't necessarily the speech itself, It's the lead up and the journey to that point. The 1 or 2 scenes before this speech give these endings so much more resonance and impact. I'm not saying these speeches are like on par with The Shawshank Redemption, but they're hype as hell and a great way to end this type of movie. In the first movie, we see Optimus and the Autobots mourning the death of Jazz and coming to terms with the fact that the Allspark is gone. We see the government dispose of Megatron, Josh Duhamel reunites with his family, Shia LaBeouf and Megan Fox get together, and it leaves us ready for Optimus Prime to give us the final word. All the loose ends have been tied up. The plot has been satisfyingly resolved, and we can see where all the characters have ended up. Optimus tells us what they're doing next. Now we're ready to hear some Linkin Park. The abruptness of the speech at the end of Rise of the Beasts makes it feel weirdly unearned. Like we just got done with the final battle and you're already leaving. We've barely had any room to breathe or fully process what we just saw happen, and you're wrapping it up so soon? Telling us the fates of our heroes is important, because without it, the movie just feels like it meant nothing. Unless you're making some kind of deconstruction of the action movie genre, it's best to give us some little insight into what the main characters are doing next, right? I'm pretty sure that Rise of the Beasts isn't some kind of brave subversion of the entire genre, so I'm guessing that leaving us hanging in terms of the fate of Optimus and the gang was some kind of mistake. He doesn't even say exactly what they're gonna do next. He just starts vague posting about waiting for Unicron to come back to Earth? What's your goal? Hey, come back, we're not done yet. What's gonna happen to you? And RC, and Wheeljack, and Wait, I just... Stop the music, hold the presses. I just remembered what Steven said earlier. About there being bigger things for Wheeljack.
But we paid homage to Wheeljacks, and it gets into like this bigger scheme of things that I can't get into. I think that's where it's at now.
Did you lie? Have you been lying to us this whole time? What's even real anymore? Does any of this stuff exist? Is any of it real? Is Wheeljack real? Wheeljack's real? Oh my god, this movie really happened, I knew it. So Transformers is real? Okay, cool. I always figured that was the case. I mean, I met Prowl once, and Optimus Prime, and Megatron. Oh my god, how was I so blind? So did the events of this movie really happen? I guess they must have. I'm so sorry, I didn't know Rise of the Beasts was a documentary about what happens when a monkey don't get his bananas. Primal, no! Part 10. Steven's Endgame. So where do we even go from here? Contrary to what some people might tell you, Rise of the Beasts did very well. While it was the lowest grossing movie of the series, Hasbro considered it a success from toy sales, and according to Paramount it broke even, so a sequel is probably gonna happen. Will they continue following Noah? Is it gonna be like a G.I. Joe crossover movie with all the iconic characters nobody knows about? Maybe. But how are they gonna outdo what they did here? Stephen Caple Jr. has talked about how he wants to make a trilogy of Transformers movies, with Rise of the Beasts being the first. Some fans have said that having Unicron in the first installment of a trilogy is a bad move, because where could you possibly go from there, right? I sort of agree, but then I remember that the first Star Wars had their own version of Unicron, and their sequel reined everything back in and told a much more personal story. Do I think the sequel will do something like that? I don't know, probably not. I'm hoping Stephen Caple Jr. and the producers, or whoever, learn the right lessons from this movie when they make the inevitable follow-up. People responded well to the human drama, the character dynamics, and big boobs. A sequel would really benefit from telling a smaller, more personal story. Trying to one-up this movie with something bigger and more explosive wouldn't work for me. Isn't that kind of part of the reason the Michael Bay movies fell off? Because they just tried to get bigger and bigger until it just became completely incomprehensible? When Rise of the Beasts is good, it's fun, but when it's bad, it's lame as hell. I feel bad about calling it a dull, dry action movie that only die-hard fans are gonna remember and enjoy, but that's what it is. It's something I would gladly stick on as background noise, but not a movie that's gonna resonate with me at all, which upsets me, obviously. I said way back at the start of this video that this whole video comes from a place of love. Despite the many comments calling me a piece of shit for not liking stuff, I genuinely do love this funny gay robot franchise. I've loved it for a long time, and I will continue to love it until the Adderall eventually kicks in. Even the parts of this franchise that I think are complete dog water, I kind of find some entertainment out of. Whether it's laughing at it, dissecting it, or just kind of turning off my brain, I can find enjoyment in almost any installment in this franchise. Almost. The point is, despite everything, I do kinda like Rise of the Beasts. It's a boring, dry, stale, hollow, and messy movie, but It's kind of fascinating to me. I can get enjoyment out of chunks of it, and it's cool to see Anthony Ramos doing some cool shit because I really like him as an actor. Would I have loved it if Rise of the Beast was a great movie? Of course I would have. That would have been awesome. But this is the movie we got, and there's no changing that. It's like Mirage's face. It may not be perfect, but you just kind of have to live with it. Yeah, I said it. Mirage is not hot. He was never hot. Everyone calls him hot and suave or whatever, but he has no riz. That's the joke of his character. He thinks he's hot shit, but he ain't.
Don't worry, you boys got this.
If you think this is attractive, you are beyond help. I will not diss your taste in robots, but this is too far. The true hottest robot in the movie is by far Big Boobs, whose name I just discovered. Yeah, sorry for not finding out earlier, I was busy. I just found out his name is actually Herbert Reinfeld the 18th, Duke of the Rust Sea. Anyway, my only hope is that these movies can get better, because eventually movies that are just kinda okay with no real substance aren't gonna cut it. It happened to the Michael Bay movies, and it's gonna happen to these too without some kind of course correction. I'm kinda hopeful for the future of these movies despite all my issues with Rise of the Beasts. Whatever happens, I'm sure Rise of the Beasts will be remembered fondly by kids who grew up with it, and maybe because of the Fortnite collab, I don't know. Stephen Caple Jr. is a good director with a lot of potential, and I think he can make a movie to surpass Bumblebee in quality if his movie didn't have 5 goddamn writers.
There's a big world out there. There's different planets out there, and we tap into that at the very beginning of this film. And I was like, I just want to introduce the idea that there's so much more to explore. The universe is huge.
He said that in a sequel, he'd want to take the Autobots or whoever to like different planets and explore the universe. He even cites the comics as an example.
We're here on Earth a lot, right? And I feel like there's just a huge universe. Like if any of you guys watched the comic books or read the comic books, especially the Japanese versions of the comic books, where I truly think are probably one of the best versions of the comic books.
Wait, what?
The Japanese versions of the comic books.
Japanese comics? You mean like the Victory manga that nobody's read, or Transformers Legends, the weird horny one? Or does he mean the Go-Go manga, the cute one? Does he mean IDW? Did he get it wrong? Does Stephen Caple Jr. think IDW is from Japan? I mean, he can't possibly be talking about, you know. In the end, it all comes down to the fact that it feels like nobody behind the scenes really knows what's going on, which isn't great for your big, expensive film series. This isn't just about world building or deep lore, it's about having a plan. The fact that nobody seems to understand what worked and what people connected to in Bumblebee, or the clear backtracking to the boring, sterile action that people hated in The Last Night. It just feels like nobody really cares. Hey, remember that pin we put in Stephen Caple Jr.? You can pull it out now. Careful. Okay, good. Stephen Caple Jr. was approached to do this movie after, apparently, a long line of other directors said no. That could be because of the reputation the Michael Bay Transformers movies have, or the very understandable take of just not wanting to do a big budget movie with as many moving parts as Transformers. Things get kind of vague here, but one of two things happened. Either the studio decided that this would also be a Beast Wars movie and pitched the movie to Stephen that way and he accepted, or Stephen Caple Jr. said he would do the Bumblebee sequel if he could add Beast Wars characters and Unicron. And I guess the studio was so desperate to get anybody on board that they just said yeah, regardless of how the Beast would work in a Bumblebee sequel. I don't blame Stephen for wanting to do a Beast Wars movie, because he clearly loves it quite a lot. But the presence of the Maximals and Unicron only bloats the movie further, and takes away attention from things that really needed more focus in the first place. Stephen Caple Jr. always talks in the behind the scenes and the press materials about the thing that matters most to him when it comes to making movies are the characters and their motivations. Maybe that was the case at one stage of Rise of the Beasts production, but it's been so clearly stated on multiple occasions that he allowed the Maximals and Unicron to pointlessly show up for no better reason than he just wanted them to. Remember at the start when I talked about the dangers of getting a fan to create something? This is the problem people have with it, front and center. Sometimes fans don't know when to show restraint. They're given all this money and they're like, I'm gonna make a Bumblebee sequel movie with Optimus Prime and Bumblebee and RC, but the Maximals and Unicron and the Terracons are there too. And my OC, Ahsoka Tano, is gonna show up, and she's friends with Luke Skywalker, and she's lived through every era, and she used to be Anakin Skywalker's secret apprentice, and she's really cool and smart, and everyone loves her. There's a fine line when a fan's making something. Don't get me wrong, fans have made great things. Some of my favorite things were made by fans. fans, like that new Ninja Turtles movie I was talking about, or the Spider-Verse movies, or the Doctor Who revival. But sometimes the temptation to do whatever you want just because you're in charge becomes too strong for some people. Like I said, this doesn't apply to all media made by fans, but it's been becoming way too common in the last few years to have something made by a fan that just feels like the director wants to relive a part of their childhood, and they're taking you along for the midlife crisis. Like, I've seen more restraint in fan films. This is why sometimes it's a good idea to hire people who aren't fans, but have a strong vision for their idea of what the series should be. Michael Bay wasn't a Transformers fan, and you can criticize every aspect of his movies all you want, but at the very least, his first movie feels so tight and focused because he didn't give a shit about Unicron or the Matrix or whatever. Somebody who doesn't give a shit about the franchise's lore or characters won't feel the need to put in all the stuff they like from the franchise, because obviously they don't know anything about it. I mean, look at Tony Gilroy. He's not a fan of Star Wars, and he made the best damn Star Wars show ever, while every other Star Wars show is filled with constant references and nods and cameos to shit only recently divorced men will care about. Tony Gilroy made a show that just so happens to be set in the Star Wars universe, almost completely devoid of references and cameos because he has no interest in that stuff. People complained the Bay movies were stuffed full of characters that were hardly developed at all. While Rise of the Beasts doesn't get anywhere near that bad, the key difference here is that the reason those movies are so stuffed is because Michael Bay didn't know when to stop. The reason Rotib is so stuffed is because Stephen Caple Jr. is a nerd. Am I criticizing Stephen for being a fan of something and wanting to see the things he likes on the big screen? No, because then I'd have to criticize Travis Knight for the same thing. The difference is that Stephen's wants are huge and actively damage the movie, while Travis's were just stuff like, I don't know, Bumblebee's gotta be a beetle. You could point to the Cybertron scene, but that wasn't even Travis's idea. What I'm saying is that putting things you want in a movie that do nothing but make you and you alone happy, without considering how it may impact the story, the characters, or the overall viewing experience, it tells us a lot about you as a director and a fan. Were you really interested in telling a story like you said you were? Or were you just out to relive a part of your childhood? Did you add the Maximals because you felt the strong emotional pull of a compelling story? Or because you wanted to see them brought to life in a live-action movie? If you really, truly cared about telling a compelling story like you said you were, then all of this stuff would never have happened, right? Surely being approached to make a sequel to the relatively low-budget, smaller-scale movie that everybody liked, and proclaiming that you'd only do it if you could stuff it with useless bullshit like a Thanksgiving turkey, that's kinda not a great thing to do, is it? It kinda reflects really badly on you as a storyteller, no? On the flip side, having a studio that doesn't know what people connected to and liked about the previous movie desperately cram the sequel full of things only fans will care about tells us a lot about the mentality of the higher-ups. Which of these two are to blame? I'm hoping it's the studio, as I'm sure most of you are too, but the unfortunate reality is that it might be both of their faults. I keep saying Steven is a good director because he is. I'm sure he's a great guy, but understanding that he was the one that wanted to do almost all of the things that drag this movie down doesn't really look good for him. Is he really more keen on delivering nostalgia bait than making a movie with any sort of substance? Any flavor that people outside of the fandom will connect with? But also, the blame has to be pointed at Lorenzo or somebody at Paramount for allowing this to happen. Like, they must have known that going from this...
You sound like a little bumblebee.
...to this... was a pretty big step. There had to have been at least one person who thought this was jumping the gun a bit. Or maybe they just don't care, I don't know, I wasn't there. We know for sure that Unicron, the racist Optimus Prime character arc, and the Terracons were Steven's idea. But the Maximals were either him or the studio depending on the day of the week. Ultimately, I guess it's subjective as to which of these four things is the thing that brings this movie down the most. If this was just a story of a bunch of Autobots trying to escape Earth while they're being hunted down by the Decepticons, it'd already be a lot tighter than it is now, right? Like, Rise of the Beasts doesn't have the most complicated plot, but somehow it feels complicated because of how convoluted and weird some of the plot elements are. I guess if you really wanted to blame Stephen Caple Jr., you could. It's clear that he wasn't all that interested in making a Bumblebee sequel, and I suppose that could be seen as selfish depending on who you ask. But at the same time, why didn't they just give him the Beast Wars movie and try and find somebody else to do Bumblebee 2? Were they really that desperate? The absolute biggest issue with Rotib is that it made an attempt to please everybody, but they realized way too late that if you try to please everybody, you please nobody. It tried to please people who liked Bumblebee with a Bumblebee sequel. It also tried to please the people who liked Beast Wars with a Beast Wars movie. And it tried to please Bayformers fans by being incredibly vague about whether it was a Bayformers prequel or not. People like this movie, sure. I'm not taking that away from anyone, but even people who like this movie agree that there was just too much shit in it. Too many characters, too big of a threat for a sequel to Bumblebee, and too much shit going on. In the end, if I could say anything to Steven or Lorenzo or whoever is making the calls at Paramount, it would be that putting your wants above what the story needs, showing such little restraint, and turning a small character-driven story into a universe-ending apocalypse just so you can see your favorite characters with a fresh lick of paint on the big screen, well, it's just not cinema.